Two ultra phones, two completely different camera systems, two cities, two absolute camera monsters, and one big question is which ultra phone actually shoots better? This is the Oppo Find X9 Ultra and this is the Vivo X300 Ultra. Now both these phones are made for one thing, cameras. And honestly, testing phones like these near the office just feels wrong. So instead of doing another basic comparison, I packed my bags, left the studio and headed first to Rishikesh and then Dharamshala to find out which ultra phone actually shoots better photos and videos in the real world. But before I jump into it, if you're new here, I am Siddharth Malhotra and you're watching Digit, where we bring you detailed, non-nonsense gadget reviews and comparisons. Here at Rishikesh at this beautiful property with both the devices to check their camera capabilities. Behind me is the infinity pool and also the sun is also going down. So let's see how their cameras perform. But before that, let's quickly talk about the hardware because both these phones are absolutely loaded when it comes to camera specs. The Oppo Find X9 Ultra comes with a 200 megapixel main Litia 901 sensor, which is a massive 1 by 1.12 inch sensor with an aperture of f1.5. Alongside that, you get a 50 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 200 megapixel 3x telephoto lens, and a dedicated 50 megapixel 10x ultra telephoto lens. There's also 3.2 megapixel monochrome sensor that will help you in the color processing. On the other side, the Vivo X300 Ultra also packs a 200 megapixel Litia 901 main sensor, but with an f1.85 aperture. Then you get a 50 megapixel ultra wide lens, a 200 megapixel 3.7x telephoto lens, and a dedicated 5 megapixel color sensing camera. On the front, both devices packs a 50 megapixel front camera. Now one thing you should know is that Vivo shoots from its main camera at 35mm by default, and if you switch to 23mm, it shifts to the ultra wide sensor. So to keep things fair, I also logged Oppo's main camera at 35mm throughout this comparison. Starting with the pool picture. Both shots honestly look fantastic at first glance, but once you start zooming in, especially near the bottom of the pool lounger, the Oppo manages to retain slightly more detail. What's interesting though is how differently both phones process the same scene. Oppo tried to keep the background more visible and detailed, while Vivo instantly went for a more dramatic look with stronger background blur. Now from the second angle, the difference becomes even more noticeable. Vivo tends to push a slight blue tint into the sky, which honestly happened multiple times during this comparison. And if you zoom into the fountain area, Oppo retains the texture and shadow detail better, while Vivo crushes some of the darker areas. While walking around the pool, I randomly noticed this bug on the floor and I instantly switched my camera to macro mode. Both phones did an incredible job here, but if you zoom into the wings, the Vivo captures slightly more texture and micro details. At that point, Ashish was busy taking photos from his camera and I instantly turned both these ultra phones toward him for portrait shots, and this is where their camera philosophy becomes really obvious. Oppo consistently brightens up the face, while Vivo tries to preserve a more natural skin tone. Plus, the portrait separation and creamy bokeh from the Vivo generally makes the image stand out more. Now at 6x on the Oppo and at 5.9x on the Vivo, things become surprisingly close, which honestly tells you how capable these telephoto systems are. By the way, I also recorded some videos near the pool.
Alright, so these videos are recording on the Oppo Find X9 Ultra and the Vivo X300 Ultra at 4K 60 fps. So sun is behind me. Now let's take a brisk walk and let's check its stabilization. So you guys tell me how's the audio quality, video quality, and overall the video stabilization.
After walking, I sat down for some portraits while Ashish clicked my photos from both devices. One thing you'll instantly notice is that Vivo looked more cropped in because of its native 3.7x focal length, while Oppo shoots at 3x, and if you zoom into the face, the beard and hair texture on the Vivo appears slightly softer. At higher zoom levels, especially around 6x, the differences become clearer. Oppo tends to blow out highlights slightly, especially on brighter areas like my shirt, while Vivo handles highlights and color accuracy in a much cleaner way. Now, the ultra-wide cameras genuinely surprised me because the results were shockingly close. In most shots, the difference was barely noticeable unless you started pixel peeping. In this particular image, both phones capture very similar levels of detail, but the dynamic range doesn't really favor Vivo here. The greens also appear more saturated on the Vivo, and once again, if you zoom into the plants, you can see Vivo crushing the shadow area slightly more aggressively. As the sun started setting, things got way more interesting because low light and sunset shots are where flagship cameras truly separate themselves. In this 35mm sunset shot, the highlights around the sun are slightly blown on the Vivo while Oppo retains more texture in the fountain area. You can even spot tiny water droplets falling from the fountain. At 230mm, Oppo's 10x telephoto lens came in handy because it didn't soft the image and retains details at the same time. Even in this shot, the colors of the shawl and fabric texture look more detailed on the Oppo. Now, this portrait shot of mine was captured at 35mm, and personally, I would actually pick the Vivo here because it instantly looks more dramatic and social media ready. But if you start zooming into the finer details like the coat texture, Oppo clearly retains more information. At the same time, there were moments where Vivo surprised me by pulling out better details from darker areas where Oppo simply lost information. But throughout this trip, one thing remained consistent. Vivo almost always added a cooler blue tint to the sky. So yeah, that was Rishikesh. Alright, I just left Rishikesh and now I'm heading towards the second city with both the devices in my hands. See you there. Alright, so after Rishikesh, I finally reached Dharamshala, and honestly, the vibe here feels completely different. Behind me is the Tauladar range that looks absolutely magical right now. So let's pull out these bad boys, the Oppo Find X9 Ultra and the Vivo X300 Ultra, and see what they can actually do here. Let's find out. Now here in Dharamshala, I mostly focused on testing the telephoto lenses because this place is literally made for zoom photography. Starting with this mountain shot, both phones honestly do an incredible job. The snow texture, mountain details and colors look fantastic. But once you move to the second shot and start zooming beyond 170mm, Vivo images begin to look slightly processed compared to Oppo. Portraits were also really interesting here because Vivo does one thing extremely well: subject separation. For example, in this image, Vivo focuses only on the first kid, while Oppo keeps both subjects in focus. The colors on the Vivo also appear punchier, which honestly makes the image stand out more. And by the way, this behavior remained consistent throughout the comparison. In many portrait shots, Oppo tried to keep the whole frame sharp while Vivo focused primarily on the face. Because of that, Oppo sometimes struggled to create proper background separation. The sunset shots were captured at 70mm on Oppo and 85mm on Vivo. And honestly, Oppo produced colors that were closer to what I actually saw in real life because the clouds generally looked darker at that moment. I also carried both these phones to an IPL match, and this is where Oppo's zoom system genuinely came in clutch. Most of the shots were captured around 30x zoom, and the results honestly speak for themselves. In this picture of Virat Kohli, you can literally spot the tattoo on his hand. And even the grass texture on the ground remains detailed. I even pushed both phones to their maximum zoom levels, 120x on Oppo and 105x on Vivo. And fun fact, I first clicked my friend's image from the main camera and then walked all the way to the opposite stand of the stadium to test the zoom. Both phones heavily relied on AI processing here, and honestly, the final results didn't look very natural. To wrap up the daytime comparison, I also captured some selfies from both devices, and personally I preferred the Vivo here because it didn't aggressively brighten up my face. Skin tones looked more natural, and even in portrait selfies, Vivo handled edge detection and details way better. If you zoom into the hair stands, the Vivo clearly retains more texture. After that, I traveled further uphill towards McLeodganj to test low light photography because honestly, this is where ultra phones are expected to prove themselves. By the way, here's a quick video of mine.
Alright, so that was Dharamshala. Right now I'm sitting in a private bus going to McLeodganj, and right now I'm recording this video at 4K 60 FPS. So now you guys tell me in the comments.
In this 35mm low light shot, the Find X9 Ultra manages to pull more details from the shadow areas. Now at 70mm on Oppo and 85mm on Vivo, the Vivo telephoto lens pulls noticeably better details. The same pattern continued in the 170mm and 139mm shots as well. But interestingly, things changed once we moved to 230mm. Here, Oppo's dedicated zoom lens clearly helped with detail retention while Vivo softens the image slightly. Now I was walking through the streets of McLeodganj, obviously to capture street photography. Oppo honestly did a better overall job in some scenarios because the colors looked richer, highlights were controlled properly, and even more textures were retained nicely. But one thing I noticed was that Oppo sometimes introduced visible grain in the sky which didn't look very pleasing. Meanwhile, Vivo's low-light portraits had way more character to them. The images looked dramatic, contrasty, and honestly more cinematic overall.
Now again I am at McLeodganj main market and right now I'm recording this video at 4K 60 FPS. It's too much noise behind me, too much honking, and it's night here. Now you guys tell me, how's the color shift, how's the SDR performing?
By the way, these both phones can shoot videos at 8K 30 FPS as well, and you can see the footage here. And beyond pure camera quality, Vivo also gives you a lot more camera focused features like horizon stabilization, portrait video mode, street photography mode, and those signature Zeiss bokeh flares. So overall, it definitely feels like the more feature-rich camera package. Now after traveling across Rishikesh and Dharamshala with both these Ultra phones, I think the conclusion is pretty simple. If you want the better zoom system, more consistent detail retention at extreme focal lengths and slightly more natural color science, then the Oppo Find X9 Ultra genuinely feels like the stronger photography tool. But if you want more dramatic portraits, better subject separation, feature-rich camera modes, and images that instantly look more cinematic and social media ready, then the Vivo X300 Ultra absolutely nails that experience. And honestly, that's what this comparison interesting because neither of these phones felt outright bad. They just approach photography very differently. So now I want to know from you guys, after watching all these samples, which Ultra phone would you actually pick? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this travel style comparison video, make sure to like the video, subscribe to The Digit, and thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.